back into action. The Board of Pharmacy meeting after our break. It's now 2:46, and we will venture backwards to our tabled item, which is package E8, Echo 8, pharmacist consulting drug lists. I look to staff member Davis for direction, please.
Okay, staff member Davis, we had a brief amount of time to review the concern that was brought up earlier today. And staff recommend at this time that the board consider adopting option 3A as shown in the mailing. We're scrolling to it, scroll up. So that is the current language on the books. A couple of important things that we think will allow us to operate and be able to communicate easily with licensees and registrants regarding this rule. We have very clear board direction that you wanted the exemption for counseling for persons working for an out-of-state pharmacy. We are not going to be able to resolve all of the concern that just was brought up right now, but we are in a rock and a hard place where if we weren't put forward a rule, then you would lose that exemption. And I know you don't want that based on previous conversation. Also, I think it raises a really great point. This language has been on the books since 2010. 13 years ago, think about pharmacy practice. For those of you who are practicing 13 years ago, I think we had computers, not typewriters, but the world has changed quite a bit. And we know even in the past 5 years, especially with COVID, that a lot of the models of dispensing have really changed in terms of siloing, practice not occurring in a physical box. One outlet is doing this work, one outlet is doing that work, another outlet is actually sending the prescription into the state, another outlet is actually dispensing it to the patient directly. And so we know that we need to go back and do like a massive kind of like technology overhaul when we look at Division 41 as we move forward with that, but then also with this. However, we do believe that the language that's been on the books since 2010 can address the concern that was brought up today, and we can work with the licensees who may have some questions should they arise, because in line 65, can you scroll so they can see 3A and 3B? We had originally, we had asked you for option 3B to say a registered drug outlet pharmacy. The previous language didn't talk about it being a registered pharmacy with us. And so we think that that would permit, or at least allow some of the flexibility, because we're not saying you have to be registered with us. You're a pharmacist, you work, maybe we might want to change the word into for, but like, working for an out-of-state pharmacy, you would still get that exemption. So we think that will get us through, and then we want to bring this rule back as we work on it. We may need work group or a rack or something like that. It's not going to be an immediate quick fix because this is a massive technology world shift change that has been brought up. But I think potentially only making one modification to that rule of saying working for an out-of-state pharmacy. That out-of-state pharmacy is the one who is taking care of the patient and whatever silo piece of the work that they're doing. With that, I give it back to you, President Doyle, to either move forward 3A as shown, or 3A potentially with the modification of N to 4 and 165, or anything else that the board feels we should discuss.
Board Member Doyle, again, I will need to ask for clarification. The staff's recommendation that 3A will meet the needs. And that's a recommendation that you have.
Yes, we believe that that will put us in a good spot for now, knowing that we will bring this back and that we will have further discussion after March 1st, so that we can really clarify and tease out some of this nuance that has been brought up.
And I'm going to go when you had also suggested that 3B is an option, and when you said striking in and adding 4, that's not the only change that would be inclusive, that staff would be recommending to only include in that language.
Staff Member Davis, staff is no longer recommending 3B as an option for the board to move forward with. I was simply stating that in 3B, we had changed the word in to for in line 73, and that we make a similar change in line 65 under 3A, just to live in the world that we are in, that people don't physically work in a pharmacy. A lot of times they just work for a pharmacy.
Thank you very much for that additional clarification. We will go around to hear recommendations from board members. Begin with board member Patel.
Board Member Patel, give me 1 minute. This looks good to me.
Board member Doyle, that is to keep 3A, which is current language.
What's the other option if we don't keep the current language, but we are not going to have 3B either, right? Did I understand that right?
Staff recommendation is for 3A, but we have the ability for 3.
Just say yes, 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 we need something, so yes.
Member Beeman,
Member Beeman, for the situation right now, I would say yes to 3A with the substitution of for in as Member Melvin is demonstrating.
board member Hemmons,
I opt out.
member Vipperman,
Like my hands are tied, so.
3A that is. Member DeBarmore, member Joyce,
Board Member Joyce said options are 3A or 3A. Okay. I will go with 3A, thank you.
member Hall,
That's for all, yeah.
board member Doyle, considering circumstances, support 3A with the substitution of the word for in as amended. Board member Chin,
BA, please.
it seems as if have any other questions or concerns? Well, the ones that are applicable, because we're talking about applicability. Okay. I board member Doyle, move to send proposed rules OAR 855-115-0001 as revised and inclusive of subpara 3A's example, the substitution of the word for instead of in on line 65 to the January 24th, 2024 rulemaking hearing.
Member Chin, second. Member Beeman, yes. Member Farmer, yes. Member Hall, yes. Member Hammond abstained.
Board Member Joyce, yes.
Board Member Patel, yes.
Member Vivian, yes.
Motion passes with board member having abstained. The next order, as a reminder, We had been scheduled to talk about compounding. But that, as noticed earlier this morning, has been deferred to a future meeting. We also are deferring our discussion on safe pharmacy practice conditions. Board Member Davis had prepared a presentation for us to review and to gain, as a policy discussion, to gain traction onto where to go from here. There was associated with that, or piggyback together, presentation from Board Member Patel regarding her recent experiences at NABP. We will continue to have her deliver that 20-minute presentation at this time, and can refresh ourselves of germane information of that when we talk about SPPC at a next possible meeting. I understand that there's a PowerPoint presentation from Board Member Patel. You can please raise that.
This board member, but I thought we are going to defer till next meeting. Did we talk about that yesterday?
Board Member Patel, yes, that was a conversation that I had with Executive Director Fox about a potential deferral, because we didn't know how the timeliness of activities were going to be today. I think that it is a very symbiotic presentation. I haven't seen it myself yet, but I think that it's intended to be very symbiotic with the SPPC presentation that Jennifer Davis had put together. So if you would prefer to defer it until the next meeting, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, we can do defer the next meeting. It's just I didn't bring my cards. My index cards to give the presentation.
Board Member Patel, you wish to defer at this time?
Yeah,
Okay.
next meeting.
All right, thank you.
Board President Doyle, with that in mind, what would you like to do? Would you like to open compounding rules to review for a little bit? Or we have the other couple of items?
Yeah, Board Member Doyle, I want to finish up with all the regular business first, and then as we have time, we'll see where we are.
Okay.
And then open up compounding if staff believes it would be a good effort that could be made. We move to issues and if with issues and activities, we see our 2024 board meeting dates that are planned for the upcoming next 12 months. And we will discuss proposed rulemaking hearing dates for 2024 with staff member Melvin.
Yes, staff member Melvin earlier in the meeting. Again, we knew that we were going to have some rules adopted before the March 1st date. So we proposed the dates of January 24th. And the typical rulemaking hearings that we set each year happen in May and November. So for 2024, that would be May 22nd, 2024 and November 26th, 2024. Back to you, Board President Doyle.
The floor is open for any discussion on the proposed 2024 rulemaking hearing dates, January 24th, May 22nd, and November 26th of 2024. Not hearing or seeing any hands, then I, Board Member Doyle, move to approve the 2024 rulemaking hearing dates as proposed.
Member Chin second. Member Beeman, yes. Member DeBarber, yes. Member Hall, yes. Member Hammond, yes.
Member Joyce, yes.
Remember Patel, yes.
Member Peppermint, yes.
Motion passes for having rulemaking on those 3 dates. We will now approve the consent agenda. Have consent agenda number 1, license and registration ratification report for the time periods of September to November of this year. We have the consent number 2, the board meeting summary from October of 2023. And lastly, the consent number 3, the strategic planning meeting summary. Is there any discussion with regards to those 3 consent items? Not seen any hands raised or comments put forth. By board member Doyle, move to approve the consent agenda.
Member Chin second. Member Beeman, yes. Member Dormer, yes. Member Hall, yes. Member Hemmings, yes.
Member Joyce, yes.
Member Patel, yes.
Member Gilberlin, yes.
Thank you. That includes business up until the pre-scheduled time of public comment at 3:45. Matters to be discussed by the board at 4 and then adjournment at 4:30. So we have an opportunity to begin compounding rules, and the staff's recommend, would it be beneficial for staff to begin reviewing and hearing comments for the initial steps of that package?
Staff member Davis, so you may recall, actually in August, we did open this up and I did a nice little presentation. And we covered 2 rules, which really hasn't been enough for me to go back and do any work based on that discussion. Today, I think it's possible we could get through, a couple more rules and I can get a little feedback and maybe start working on revisions. We're definitely, I don't think, going to be able to get through all of them by any stretch. So if you would like to use this time to do that, I'm happy to open them up.
Yes, let's please continue to move forward.
For those on the phone, this is going to be mailing E10. Okay, E10 it is. All right, so today is the board's first review of most of the proposed rules for compounding and a new division 183. As a reminder, part of the board's strategic 2022-2026 plan, we're working to systematically refresh rules and standardize rule development, improving clarity, compliance, and longevity. The strategic plan includes a key action of amending rules for drug compounding to ensure consistency with updated USP chapters 795 and 797. At the August board meeting, the board discussed proposed amendments that are needed in Division 6 for definitions, Divisions 41 for general requirements, Division for pharmacy general requirements, Division 43 correctional facilities, dispensing practitioner drug outlets, and community health clinics to align the definitions and the outlet types with the amended compounding rules. Today, we're going to pick up where the board left off in August. These rules do only apply to the preparation and dispensing of compounded drugs from a drug outlet. They do not apply to the preparation and direct administration of compounded drugs by a healthcare provider. The board utilized a work group to develop and revise these rules. The work group met 5 times, February 2023, April, May, June, and July. At this meeting, you're not going to consider submitting the proposed rules, so I'm gonna skip that. So there is I think it's probably a little confusing now because our memories are short and yet these words on a page last a very long time. So the rule language that's highlighted in yellow denotes staff proposed amendments that were made between the rule package as it was proposed at the June 2023 board meeting. And the board didn't review it, but you sent it out for rulemaking comment only. And we got a bunch of outside rulemaking comment only, which was super helpful. And like coming back and going, we probably should change that. We can see that this is going to be a problem point, or we need to facilitate a board discussion so we can get more input from the board. So the yellow highlights are changes since it was sent out for rulemaking in June of 2023. I have not worked on this package otherwise. There are no other modifications. So it's not the language that was sent out in June. It's the modifications made post public comment, but the board has not had time to discuss it yet. So as a reminder, quick recap of my entire presentation from August in like 2 paragraphs. Although compounded drugs can serve an important need, they also compose a higher risk to patients than FDA-approved drugs. Compounded drugs are not FDA-approved, which means they have not undergone FDA pre-market review for safety, effectiveness, and quality. In most cases, the facilities that compound these drug products are not required to comply with CGMP requirements. CGMP is current good manufacturing practice and is a set of regulations that ensure the safety, identity, strength, quality, and purity of drug products. These compounders and facilities are regulated by the states, which is us. At the August 2023 board meeting, I provided a detailed background and summary of compounding in a presentation. Board members and the public are encouraged to reference this presentation as you contemplate these rules. You can find the presentation linked in the board's meeting minutes from August 2023 on the board's website. The compounding group has provided feedback on many of the proposed rules I'll be reviewing today, and I will summarize the group input for selected rules as I move through the package. The board did look in August at some of these rules, like I said, the ones in Division 6, 41, and 43. We've made a few small grammatical edits to the rules in Division 43, and I don't have a line number, so I apologize. But that's where I made a few really small changes. I don't even know that I want to go over them because I would like to use the board's time to get feedback, but I will just point out in 855-043-0545, paren 10, we just rearranged the sentence a little bit. In 855-041-0630, there's some grammatical cleanups that happened in paren 5F and paren 6. And the board will be coming back and seeing these again so we can discuss in greater detail. And 855-043-0740 is the same sentence rearrangement that we did in the previous rule in paren 30. At the August board meeting, the board discussed the applicability division of this rule. So now if you'll scroll down to 855-183-0001, it's going to be a few pages because there's a whole bunch of rules for other outlets.
Any idea? What'd you say?
0001. The definition of compounding at 0005, registration requirements for various types of compounding, and if drug outlets should be required to maintain accurate compounding status in the board's online registration in 0010. The board considered if this information would be helpful for sterile compounding, but could possibly be misleading for non-sterile compounding activities based on the broad array of non-sterile compounding activities. So for each rule in 855-183 in the whole division, we're going to be adding, before we send to rulemaking at the beginning, effective whatever date the board decides. You have lots of flexibility here. We have learned from the really fun process of these licensee rules that it has created a kind of a transparency issue because you can't see the new rules for pharmacists unless you look at the filing. You can't see it in the OARD site. We talked with a couple other boards that have been through a process like this, and that what they have done is at the beginning of every single rule, like it would say designation effective, let's just pick a date, July 1st, 2025 for fun, and then the rule. And that way, when they file an OARD, they can file it with an effective date of the day that the board motions or the week after. And it sits out there, and then people would be able to see the rules that are in Division 45 and the rules that are in Division 183. So they can see the current rules and what's coming very clearly in the online system. So we are going to work to use this methodology moving forward. It works great when you're adopting a new division of rules, Where this doesn't work the best is when you're making an amendment to some rules. So let's say we need to amend something in 41. We can't have it like sit out there for years, but you can have the rule and then under the rule say effective this date, this language is now applicable. Does that make sense? So we're just trying to increase the transparency based on the learnings that we've had from the licensee rules. I don't really like that these rules are frozen and then we can't go back and touch them and they're very hard to deal with. So by putting an effective date at the beginning of each rule, that will help us to be able to then go back and modify if we have additional learnings prior to the rule becoming effective. So in 855-183-0050 will be the first rule that is new for us to discuss. Again, the tiny highlights show where phrases were inserted since the July 2023 rulemaking version. So in paren 1, all personnel who prepare and supervise the preparation of a compound must obtain the education, training, and experience to demonstrate competency as required by the USP standards applicable to the preparation of compounded sterile and non-sterile products, and be capable and qualified to perform assigned duties prior to independently engaging in compounding. Paren 2, training must be conducted by qualified individuals on a continuing basis with sufficient frequency required by applicable USP standards to ensure that compounding personnel remain familiar with operations and policies and procedures. In paren 3, the training must be documented and records retained according to OAR 855-183-0550. Paren 1 through 3 address the training requirements for compounding personnel. The July 2023 rulemaking version included a rule on the designated person. USP standards require that the facilities assign a designated person. In ORS 689005, paren 31B, so our statutes, the compounding, dispensing, labeling of drugs and devices, except labeling by a manufacturer, packer, or distributor of non-prescription drugs and commercially packaged legend drugs and devices, is the practice of pharmacy. Thus, the designated person must be a person who can practice pharmacy, a pharmacist for a drug outlet, practitioner with prescriptive and dispensing authority for a dicto or CHC. Board staff have removed that rule as there were already rules in place under pharmacists that only a pharmacist can practice pharmacy. If the act required in USP for the designated person to conduct is the practice of pharmacy or supervision in the practice of pharmacy, then the person would need to be a pharmacist. There does not need to be a rule in 183 to point this out as an existing pharmacist responsibility. We remove that based on public comment feedback. In paren 4, each drug outlet must ensure that A, for non-sterile compounding, personnel in the compounding area are authorized to be in the area by the person providing supervision when compounding activities are occurring. Paren B, for sterile compounding, personnel in the compounding area are authorized by the person providing supervision to be in the area. Paren 4A and B, staff have revised since July rulemaking hearing to be clear that other activities can occur in the designated compounding area for non-sterile compounding when compounding is not occurring. Other activities cannot happen in the sterile compounding area when compounding is not occurring because it needs to be maintained sterile. If there were other activities occurring, it could compromise the area. In both non-sterile and sterile, the person supervising the compounding must authorize the personnel to be in the compounding area. Paren C, the annual self-inspection is completed using the board's compounding self-inspection form by July 1st and retained for board inspection. We had omitted this from the July 2023 rulemaking revision. I think that's because we were right in the middle of adopting the new rules and making them effective for this self-inspection form. So we just put that back in. And what was previously there in 855-045-0220, paren 2, that's you're seeing as struck out language has been moved into the policies and procedures section of the rule. That is all I have for this rule related to personnel requirements. I hand it over to you for President Doyle for board discussion.
Thank you. We'll begin with discussion on this rule 0050 with board member Beeman.
Member Beeman, this point, it seems that most of this aligns with what we need to have in rules according to the basics. One phrase I pause at is obtain the education and how that might be interpreted by disease. I think complete appropriate training is more apt. I look forward to hearing what others have to say.
Member Beaman, is it the obtain verb or is it the
It's the,
education noun?
in the education piece, it makes it seem like we are hinting at some sort of a program or there are a plethora of ways to be trained, and thus by being trained, you are being educated. And I just think that phrase is a bit limiting, and I prefer the old language of complete appropriate.
Member Hemmons,
Nothing to add.
member Vickerman,
Board member Bibber. So then, I'm assuming that by everything in here, you're saying that it aligns with the USP.
So
What is USP requirements, is that correct?
Steph Member Davis, so when the work group met, they did not want to repeat USP requirements and rule. So they really wanted us to focus on where the state requirements are stricter than USP, or USP doesn't have something that clearly defined. So you'll see a lot of times in the beginning of a rule, as we get further into these rules, it'll say you must document all of the requirements of USP 797 and do the following, because that was where we differed. When it comes to personnel, they thought it was that, it kind of went back and forth, like, and when we're doing list of things, they wanted just to like not repeat USP. But when something like personnel and training, they wanted to make sure that it meshed with, because you didn't want like really unclear, like, well, USP says you have to have this training, but then the rule only says you have to have experience, right? Like not having to put them together. So we made sure that it aligned with USP, but it's not a direct repeat of USP, and it's not meant to conflict with USP. If that is a long way of answering your question.
Yes, and it is, and to be clear, I love the obtain education and the experience. I prefer that. But my comment is more along the lines of, at the strategic planning, we have decided that we'd like to go with the recommendations of the federal laws and requirements on things that we have in rules, so we're not adding to it. And I may be wrong, but that is what I heard from the strategic planning. And I just wondered if that was taken into consideration when writing these. And it's not, I'm assuming it's not. I am good with what it says. I'm just thinking ahead of, are we gonna put these into rule and then next week or in February gonna have to change them because the strategic planning asked if that's it. That being said, I am perfectly great with everything that is on there. I happen to love the obtain education and whatnot, so that's my comment. I don't want to go backwards.
Staff Member Davis, USP is not a federal law. That is, it's a standard, it's a guidance document,
That's what I meant.
right? And we are adopting potentially in these rules, we didn't go over that rule today, but adopting the newest USP as our standard by reference. And remember, compounding isn't, It is regulated at the federal level, right? But when you're within the state, it's really the state that regulates the compounding that happens within the state. And then there's a lot more federal regulations about compounding that happens outside of the state or at a larger volume and then is shipped across state lines. So,
And board member Peppermint, just one more. This is not my forte, so I'm gonna rely on the experts to guide me. All that I can, add is, what I think is correct in, the wording of it and how I interpret it as somebody who doesn't know what they're reading and is reading it. So, I'm not versed on compounding at all, nor do I want to be. And so I just have to go with that. So that being said, I like what I read.
Remember the formal?
Board member DeBarmore. I listened in on a good number of the compounding work groups, and that was definitely a theme throughout the conversations, was not to regurgitate USP. For this particular item, it's hard not to. So I would caution us picking other words just to not regurgitate. The word education is nowhere in either 795 or 797. The word education doesn't exist anywhere. So to board member Beeman's point, adding it to our rules would signify that we would expect there be some sort of program. And education would you end with a certificate or something of that nature, which in an ideal world would be outstanding. But the standards, the USP standards say all personnel who compound or have direct oversight of compounding personnel must be initially trained and qualified by demonstrating knowledge and competency. Simple, straightforward, and I think in this case, it makes sense to regurgitate that single sentence because I don't know that it could. That is straightforward and it is clear. That's that would be my only, I think we will make it more confusing by changing the word. Case. Everything else in that section is great.
Remember Joyce?
The board member Joyce. So yes, I do have a problem with the word education because it does imply a formal type of certification of training. It implies that, and USP doesn't, as was mentioned, doesn't even mention that word education. There is institutional training by qualified personnel. And so there's a training protocol, which includes monitoring the garbing of donning and doffing of gloves. There's a thumbprint, glove thumbprint testing, and there's aseptic technique testing. Those are all done at the facility, at the institution by qualified individuals. And those qualified individuals are also tested themselves annually. So let's find another word other than education, the training, what have you. Because what I'm seeing here is pretty much per USP. I mean, we're saying this and that and then refer to USP or as required by USP, but so far it's per USP. Let's not use education. I appreciate the clarification on qualified individuals that you mentioned. But other than that, it looks good, and it's common sense mirroring, almost mirroring the USB, basically. Let's get rid of education, or the word education. Although I do like formal education, but not this stuff.
Member Hall?
Member Hall. I'm fine with everything here. I agree with the, going with the wording, the USB using and not using obtained education. I think it's everything else looks good to me.
Remember Doyle, I don't have any issues with or I'm in support of everything is written. I don't have any substantive, recommendations. My viewpoint on education is it's, more wide open worldly approach, to preparation for being able to deliver USB 797, 795. Both, training and, training is a synonym for that, but I think that maybe instruction, the word instruction may be, a word that might be more palatable to the board, instruction and training. Thank you. Member Chin?
Member Chin, would just like to make sure that whatever is put out isn't confusing, and then we have people saying, well, what other education do I need besides the training? So right now, I'm supporting just the training. If there is another strong support for another word besides education, I think just trying to be succinct and not confusing would be great.
Member Patel?
Member Patel. Yes, I agree. USB, they have no authority to enforce. It's FDA have the authority to enforce. USB is just the base standard practice for the compounding. And I personally think none of the other states, they are even more stricter than the USB. So why we want to add more words, getting more stricter, more requirement than the USB? That's beyond my understanding. With that said, I would just say yes, get initial training, and if you demonstrate the experience in compounding, I think that should suffice instead of having more education and more words. Okay.
Member Davis?
Okay, we're ready to move on. I'm going to just give you a warning. I expect that this next conversation will take more than 15 minutes. I think I might be able to set it up and maybe go around once and just get some initial thoughts and reactions, and then we'll probably need to table discussion because I believe I'm supposed to be done at 3:45. Okay. But let's open the discussion. So 855-183-0200. This is compounding general requirements. This is what I was just referring to about adopting standards by reference in our rules. And we currently have standards adopted. You can see the struck through language of like what is current. But there's some pretty significant changes that were recommended by the work group. And so it looks like a lot of new language. Paren 1 has been updated to reflect the most current version of USP standards. I haven't checked it in recent months. There could be some updates, so I will do that before we would ever move this to rulemaking. Paren E was removed. Rachel, if you can scroll down. Paren E has been removed as suggestion of the work group to include the additional standards that must be adhered to under the primary standards. The way we used to do this is like, you must follow USP 795, 797, 800, 825, and then in E, we just stuck in all of the references that were in one of those standards. And there was a concern that it would have read previously, it would have required a pharmacy to adhere to all the standards listed in E, even if it wasn't referred to in the primary standard. So if they're only doing non-sterile compounding, not using hazardous drugs, then why would they have to comply with, something that's listed in E that's not even listed in the 795 standard? So what we did was we went back, and if you scroll back up now, Rachel, sorry, like in Paren A, it says you must follow 795 And all the chapters referenced therein, and it lists out everything that was referenced therein. So you're only following the supplementary chapters that are included in the original standard. I'm not going to read all these numbers and dates to you. I'm going to save everybody's thought process there. We're going to scroll down to paren 2. In paren 2, a drug must only be compounded and dispensed pursuant to a patient-specific prescription issued by a licensed healthcare professional authorized to prescribe drugs, except as provided in OAR N55-183-0730. And I'll come back to that. A limited quantity may be compounded in anticipation of prescription drug orders based on routine, regularly observed prescribing patterns. So this rule was previously in the definition of compounding. So, sometimes we find that we have rules and definitions, and we've been working really hard to get rules out of definitions. So we have moved that rule out of the definition. But we also have added an exception in this first sentence with that exempts certain situations, and that relates to veterinary compounding. The board, I anticipate in the future when we finally get to go through all of these rules, there's going to be some very robust discussions about veterinary compounding, the role of the FDA and USP, and what we can and can't do, and what we can put in rule, and if we should put in rule, all that. So we look forward to having that conversation. But that's what that exemption is about, is some veterinary compounding situations. In paren 3, a drug may be compounded for a commercially available product according to OAR 855-183-0710. Again, we're going to have a discussion on copies of approved drugs, which is what that rule is about. I just wanted to point out that this could change based on the board's determination. Like if you're like, you know what, we looked at this rule, we don't want to have a rule about this, then we would obviously remove paren 3 because the rule doesn't exist. So more discussion to come. The next section of the rule in paren 4 is about compounding technology. And there's no doubt that the use of compounding technology improves patient safety and reduces errors. The Institute for Safe Medication Practices is a staunch advocate of technology solutions and strongly encourages their implementation to augment manual processes and provide additional safeguards due to sterile compounding. In addition, ASHP evidence suggests that barcode verification and gravimetrics coupled with real-time alerts created by an IV workflow management system, such as an automated compounding device, can detect and prevent many potentially serious medication errors that would not have been recognized with traditional verification methods. An ASHP 2020 study on the pharmacy dispensing and administration practice found that 21% of hospitals use sterile IV workflow management systems. This is a 15% increase since a previous study in 2014. There's a wealth of literature demonstrating the safety of the use of automated compounding devices for sterile compounding, and they were referenced in the gray box. You're welcome to go back and click on the links and take a look at the studies. Boston Children's Hospital concluded that 23% of errors detected by the system were undetectable by the pharmacy's previous verification practices. Texas Children's Hospital concluded that 9% of intercepted errors could have resulted in patient harm. And Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center found that 72% of errors are intercepted by the automated system, including incorrect drug or diluent, concentration, or expired drug. The remaining 28% of errors are intercepted by pharmacists and related to dose preparation and the wrong volume or damage to the final product. The work group discussed these rules at length and agreed that these technologies increase patient safety, but also discussed the reality that this technology can be expensive. It needs to be implemented thoughtfully, and outlets will not likely implement these changes unless they are required by rule. Thus, proposed today are a few options for the board to discuss that include language of may or must, with a future may, must, or must with a future implementation date. The July 2023 rulemaking version only discussed sterile compounding. However, you'll see an option 4-1-1 as shown below. The workgroup consensus was that barcoding should be required for all compounding and not just sterile compounding. So I'll just read these and then I'll just give it back to Board President Doyle for some like very minimal starting discussion. But in 411, and this date of July 1st, 2025 was chosen last summer. So it was like a year from now. That date can obviously be moved and changed. Beginning July 1, 2025, verification of compounded non-sterile preparations and compounded sterile preparations must utilize a system that incorporates barcoding to verify ingredients. Utilizing barcoding with about a 3-year effective date was the consensus of the work group. The cited benefit to adding the language in now is that something will be in effect in like 3 years. It would allow outlets to know something is required by rule so they can procure resources and funding to implement. As many facilities shared, they were not able to make updates or get funding until something is required in our rules. So it could potentially help facilitate compliance and transparency by adding a time frame now. Another option in 412, verification of compounded sterile preparations may use a system that incorporates imaging or gravimetrics to verify ingredient quantity and finished CSP volumes. While the work group agreed this is the right direction to head, at the time they were not comfortable with the use of must for imaging and gravimetrics. Some members included that must in the future would likely be needed, but this needs a very long lead time of at least 3 to 5 years for anyone to be able to implement. In paren 4.2, verification of compounded non-sterile preparations and compounded sterile preparations may utilize a system that includes barcoding to verify ingredients and imaging or gravimetrics to verify ingredient quality and finished volumes. This option is a permissive statement for all compounds and not necessarily a rule that could be enforced. It's more of an informative rule. In 4.3, verification of compounded sterile preparations may use a system that incorporates barcoding to verify ingredients and imaging or gravimetrics to verify ingredient quality and finished CSP volumes. This option is a permissive statement for sterile compounding only and not necessarily a rule that could be enforced. So I'm going to stop here and give it back to President Doyle just to get some first impressions from board members about the uses of these technologies and may versus must, and then you can take that information, go back and sit on it, and come back to you with maybe some revised rules.
Board President Doyle, so the question at hand is the use of may and must in each one of those 4 dash statements, not necessarily choosing between the 4 dash statements.
But there's a lot of things that you could discuss here. Like, do you want barcoding for sterile and non-sterile? Do you want imaging and gravimetrics for sterile only? If you want those things, that's probably where to start the conversation, is the basic conversation of barcoding, and then the next conversation of imaging and gravimetrics. And then if you are wanting to move towards that, like, do you want to make it a must, or do you want to make it a may, or do you want it to be a must with 3 years to implement? Like, just kind of where is everybody at? Just kind of get a temperature read on where you think about incorporating technologies in light of patient safety. These are not USP requirements to utilize these technologies. These are truly just they were discussed by the work group as clear patient safety increasing measures.
So we'll do a round each board member. Unfortunately, because we have a 3:45 deadline, has 30 seconds to provide what their feedback is with regard to the request from staff. Board member Hemmons,
Comment,
member Vipperman.
board member Vipperman, in the light of patient safety, I think that I would like to say us.
Board member DeBarmore.
Board member DeBarmore. I can't say must at this time, and we can't use should, right?
Or should is may.
Is may.
I mean, it's the same thing.
I don't.
Right, but then, and right, it has the same effect in the law.
I think it's gonna be very hard for the small and rural hospitals and organizations. This could be potentially crippling to
Member Joyce.
Board Member Joyce, in regards to CSPs, I do support a must. However, I do also support, maybe a 1/1/2027 implementation. A lot of these things, yeah, IV admixture can be dramatically, made, more, but you can dramatically improve patient safety with the use of these technologies. And I support like an implementation, 3 to 5 years down the road as I'm in that camp. Thank you.
Member Hall,
Member Hall. I agree that the sterile compounding should, at some point, barcoding should be a must. The other items are important. And safety, but this type of technology requirements is actually gonna require more technician. It slows you down. I mean, from my experience. And, you know, the pharmacist still has to do visual inspection. My initial thought, my concern.
Board Member Doyle, I will yield my time for the moment, to Board Member Chin,
Member Chin has no comment.
Member Patel.
Remember Patel, well, I talked fast, we have 30 seconds, so, okay,
I yield-
that's the,
yielded my time, so you have a minute.
perfect, thank you. So that's the another rule that we shouldn't have work group. We need a rack. So, and we need an equal representation from the each stakeholders. And I don't think so. That's the message I got because I was the part of that work group too. We shouldn't have must in any of the technologies. This is pretty expensive. Yes, it's going to cost to the organization. Yes, you need more staffing, you need more people to train them. And what if this technology don't work? What if it's broke down? Then what are you going to do? Just shut down the hospital? Now no one get any medication? Okay, so no one is implementing, and whatever data you present, like, look at those hospitals, you know, how much revenue they have. They're the big hospitals. Like, what if you implement that onto the rural area, small hospital, or just the one small compounding pharmacy? That's just, you're not comparing, it's like apple to orange. So no, we shouldn't have this technology. No one is implementing too. None of the boards are also, they're not implementing. It's crazy talk. Thank you.
Member Beaman.
Member Beaman, I feel no need for Oregon to be stricter than USP. We have accepted USP for years. That has been touted as the gold standard, and that's why it is not really guidance, it is what the FDA holds us to. So I don't feel a need to be stricter in any way and put our licensees in limbo. In this specifically, I would say may, I would not say must. And I respectfully don't appreciate the comment of that licensees may don't implement our codes or other technology unless they are mandated to, or unless we put a must in there. I think that's an unfair statement, and it's not how I feel as a person or as a board member, because we have seen technology implemented rapidly and without must.
We concluded today's work on compounding. We transition to public comments. Can I read the text in my script? Staff Member Melvin.
Yes, thank you.
We will now take public comment. Please note that the board will not deliberate items such as formal requests, issues under current investigation, requests pending before the board, currently proposed rules during public comment. We have a time limit for each person to speak for 3 minutes. And at the end of 3 minutes, I will interrupt and ask to finish your comment quickly. We will begin with our first speaker. Our first speaker is joining us virtually. That is Joanne Wagner. Begin.
Just a moment. We need to unmute her. She's still on mute. Joanne, if you can hear us, can you unmute your phone, please? If you press *6 on your phone, that should unmute you. Try one more time. Hold on. Everything's. Unfortunately, Joanne, we are unable to hear you. You may want to leave the call and try joining again. Can we come back to her?
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll circle back around. Our next speaker is Victoria Kroger. Please join us next to Director Fox.
Again, Victoria Kroger, Oregon licensed pharmacist and Oregon resident, manager for Walgreens Pharmacy Affairs team. Just wanted to take the time today, want to say happy holidays, going into the new year. Wanted to also thank the board for the work that they've been doing. The past few board meetings have been immense. There has been a ton of work that you all have had to review and look through, and the comments and the conversations. You know, as a citizen of Oregon and you know, someone who's incredibly passionate about patient care, the work that you're doing is really appreciated. I asked the board to continue to preserve clarity in the rules, as well as making sure that the process includes input from the public and key stakeholders. I was able to listen to parts of the call yesterday virtually and really reflected on the comments some of the board members made around the speed that we're sending rules to rulemaking, that they really haven't been fully discussed by the board members or collaborated with key stakeholders around the state. So as we go into a new year, just continue to collaborate with the board staff and give them the direction they need to give you the materials that you all need to review and collaborate and really get that public input, whether it's a work group, a RAC, or even more informal conversations with key stakeholders, so that when it does come to rulemaking hearing, we don't continue to spin our wheels and making sure that the rules are clear and continuing to promote safety for the public. So thank you very much again, and I look forward to the next meetings.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brian Mayo.
Good to see you guys all. Last time we saw each other was in Newport, so happy holidays. First of all, I want to thank first, I guess, Brian Mayo, Executive Director of the OSP, Oregon State Pharmacy Association. Just want to thank you for reversing the rule about pharmacists and diagnose. appreciate you striking that today and moving forward. That's a big win for the licensees and for the patients across Oregon. So thank you so much for listening to our appeal and following through with it. The other thing that I want to mention is, want to compliment you guys for the work that you're doing at the strategic plan meeting in Newport. You guys set a tone and you followed through with it today and yesterday. So it's been great to see the improvements from the last time we saw each other until today. So appreciate everything you guys are doing, and we're looking forward to the new year and moving forward. So if OSPA can be a partner and do anything for you guys, please reach out and let me know. Happy holidays.
Staff member Melvin?
Yes, unfortunately, she's unable to unmute, or I'm uncertain. So we're still in the same position. We cannot hear her. Sorry.
We have an obligation to await a certain amount of time. Is there, do we have any indication that they're still trying to connect?
Unfortunately, no, she just left the call, so.
Okay,
We
we'll
can-
wait for a moment to see if
Okay.
there's a rejoin.
Okay.
President Doyle, if the participant is unable to rejoin the meeting, staff could just ask the participant to.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Joanne, are you able to hear us now?
I could hear you, but you couldn't hear me, and I hit all of my proper
You can-
buttons.
We can hear you now, so.
Okay.
Board President Doyle, go ahead.
You circle back to me, or am I ready?
Ms. Wagner, this is Board President Doyle. Please go ahead. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. For several years, I've been documenting chronic and systemic irregularities at Multnomah County Animal Services Euthanasia Log and agency's failure to comport with Pharmacy Book of Records with insufficient or redacted Pharmacy Book of Records entries and wasted material. We all know that post-COVID, there's been widespread attrition of veterinary personnel with increased animal care needs, yet with the apparent loosening of Oregon state veterinary requirements, situation has become more dire. Despite Secretary of State Oregon Audits Division, monitoring of controlled substances needs to be strengthened in light of certain veterinary controlled substances making their way into illegal street trafficking drug usage. So what I'm seeing here is the Multnomah County Animal Services, an insulated and self-policing organization without chair, commissioner, or community services oversight that falls outside the purview of Oregon Veterinary Medical Examining Board, is an agency that is doing whatever it needs to do to keep themselves less transparent and more closed off, including falsifying records and substance abuse that is either wasted or put back on the shelf with animals midway through sedation, then microchip scanned and rushed out under catheter for resuscitation. Not once, not twice, but at least 8 times in the last few months. So we have a workaround for the county now. Apparently, they have a new protocol that's called the CHILL protocol. This entitles them to sedate animals that they might think they might want to sedate for euthanasia, but they're going to just leave them kind of in a twilight zone while they scan them for the microchip. And then as soon as the microchip comes up and it's detected, they can move them right into euthanasia. And this often takes place hours later. But I'm seeing this now twice. It's not just once, it's twice. And it's a new procedure that they're using as their workaround. I have all the records. I have all the animal IDs. I have all the documentation if anybody cares. I'm not speaking anecdotally, but what I am seeing is the flagrant disregard for protocol and for proper record keeping that we already know has been predetermined since, years before. So it's only new that it's come to light because media went with it. So we have a chair that wants this thing dealt with. She doesn't know how to deal with it. She can't even hire up a staff that's complete with veterinarians and certified professionals. So what we have are veterinary assistants that are being trained on the job to do everything from diagnosing to prescribing to euthanizing. This is the new normal, and apparently it's acceptable. Have I used up my 3 minutes? And if so, thank you.
Yes, you have 3 seconds left.
I have 2 seconds left. Thank you again.
Thank you.
How's about that?
We've reached the conclusion of public comment. We now move into our section called Matters to be Discussed by the Board. We will now take time for each board member to provide comments, ideas, items for future board meetings. We will begin with Board Member Vipperman.
So this is like an idea of what we want to see, any good ideas?
The information for the good of the order of the board. Any concerns that you have, anything that you wish to see for the future. You want to get rid of this section that we're installing today or reinstalling for the first time. It could be anything.
I think this is a great idea. I was talking to board member DeBarmore when we got here the other day. And we brought up that we think that like when we started, where public comment is at the end of the third day, used to be every day. At the end of every day. And I think that, looking at our strategic planning where we want to be open, and get more input from stockholders, I would like to see that we do public comment at the end of every day instead of just once per meeting. Was my input.
Thank you. Board Member DeBarmore.
Board Member DeBarmore, that was when Cindy was talking to you.
That was when I was talking to you. No, I'm not.
I appreciate this forum and I'm excited about this ad. I wasn't mentally really prepared to think about it. We were tackling a lot and I appreciate we did slow down this meeting. I know it created some backlog that was not anticipated, but I do appreciate that we did really take the letters and comments that we've got. Never did we need a whole day to really digest the comments that have come in after a rulemaking hearing. It's never been needed because we've never received that much. So I did the right thing. And I think I would like to just make sure we continue to make sure we have that time allotted going forward. If we have significant feedback like we did after a rulemaking hearing.
Member Joyce.
Board Member Joyce, so it's tough with rules because there's that dichotomy of us focusing on patient safety and not being overly prescriptive. So how do we do that? It's not easy. I just want to make comment on like the pharmacy landscape. It's becoming more automated. More people are moving towards mail order and less of the brick and mortar pharmacy. So as we go forward, we have to look ahead at where we want to go with rules, because like I said, we're using more technology. And with technology, you can help mitigate some of the staffing shortages with the use of technology and the use of AI potentially in the future. But as I mentioned a couple days before, about the pharmacist shortage that's coming up, with enrollments being down 33% over the last 10 years. We're now graduating classes are becoming smaller and smaller over the last 10 years. So in 5 to 10 years, we are going to be short of pharmacists. I also wanted to touch base again on pharmacy technician education. We get feedback all the time that institutions are exhausted with having to train and retrain brand new technicians that they are hiring right off the street because they've had no formal education at all. They're unprepared. And so they're having to be trained there. And on top of that, on top of all the work that's going into training technicians, because that's not being done anywhere else. There's no formal education for technicians. It's being done there on site. It's being done there on site, actually. So it's not easy. And we're asking for the retail department to do more and more with vaccines, expanding the healthcare to pharmacies. So we have to look at those things as we go forward. Thanks.
You, Board Member Hall.
Wonderful. We're prepared for this, but this is my first full 3-day meeting, and I learned a lot. Strategic planning, I'm excited about things are going and learning about where things have been for the board, and forward to having this opportunity at the end of the meeting to bring up issues. So why not?
I'll defer to going last.
Board Member Chen, thank you. This is really cool. I had mentioned to Board Member Efremov about, we had asked about doing a count of cases and why they're so, why they keep rising. But I also noticed we had one particular case of the 16, sort of like just for one case. And I offered a suggestion that maybe there would be a variance when we have something like that, because one case really bumped up our stats, and so it could make it look really, oh my gosh, we've got so much, but it was really not that much. So it's just a comment to staff. I don't know if it would be helpful to our new executive director, Mr. Fox, or to other like member, it would be really helpful to me, because I just don't get. Here's Oregon. I didn't know that a prescription was done in 14 different places before I got it at my pharmacy. I would love to see, here's Oregon, here's the pharmacy. How many places does it bounce? How many people does it bounce to? And who's the remote? Who's the blah, blah, who's the blah, blah, where do we live? That would be really cool to see that. When somebody has quickly, my ideas would be nursing board returns and owns the NA training. And if there were a program in the country that we could own and do the tech training for the entry level tech, that would be an idea for the future of pharmacy.
Board Member Patel.
Board Member Patel, I'm not going to repeat myself, whatever Board Member Waperman and Board Member Debamor said, I agree with them. And yeah, we should put the realistic agenda on for the meeting. It's just like we always never complete our agenda and it's just a bit confusing and, we always try to hurry up getting done, but sometimes we just, miss the point, like why we are discussing these rules for the public safety for the licensees. So we should slow down and take a time before we even push the rule to even before the public hearing. The other thing is like there are lots and lots of pharmacies closing, even more pharmacies are closing. We have certain rules which are very prescriptive and restrictive. And then now one of the thing is like, you can't even close your pharmacy, even, you can't keep it open and where those prescriptions go. So no one wants to buy your prescription or no one wants to take your prescription, then what that pharmacy is supposed to do? They are unable to open it. We have to revisit those rules and I don't want to be a right, I want to be a wrong. That's not the case, and I hope some more pharmacy open in Oregon. But I'm anticipating more pharmacies will close. And those rules, if no one wants to take your prescription, then. Thank you.
Board Member Beeman.
Board Member Beeman, I appreciate this little carve out of time. I didn't know what to prepare, so I didn't really prepare. But I appreciate the slowdown and apologize for the tantrum that I threw that caused it potentially. But I do appreciate it and feel a lot better about the work that we did this meeting. I too echo a lot of other board members that I'm concerned about access and access to access for patients is at a higher priority of importance than I think it has been, at least in my time on the board. And if we keep losing pharmacies in Oregon, yes, there is a mail order option. Until that, maybe, we don't know, but we have everything being filled out of states for our patients. Acute care is very challenging and also we have less oversight as a board over what happens in that pharmacy because we're relying on the inspections and the documentation of other states. So I just will continue to advocate for access, and that is a huge and growing part of patient safety that may make our ideals have to shift to find a path to allow for it. Thank you.
Board Member Hemmons.
Member Hemmings, I agree with most of what's been said. I find it uncomfortable when you have these rules and we're being, I feel, forced to make decisions and to vote without really understanding what is actually written and the implications of rules. And I was just wondering like how, like what happened today, how did we get here to a place where we had to make a decision, and if we didn't make the decision, we wouldn't have rules or whatever the case might be for a particular issue. I was trying to, how did we get to that place? So I don't know, I just think it's very uncomfortable. For me, it was, and it to be felt like I'm being forced to make a decision about something I really don't understand. And I don't think it's okay for me to just always say, I abstain. Not why I'm here. So.
My feedback is that I think board staff have acknowledged at the strategic planning meeting that there has been a lot of activity, the number of rules that we've been engaged in has been increasing over time, and that information was shared for us in a pictorial, if you will. But staff had advised, and I see, if you will, that volume decreasing. And so I think that, we're getting over the hump, and there might be some relief that board members will feel in the near future. With regards to, not only is this a forum for feedback, for board members and to make recommendations, but there are agenda setting meetings and post meeting reduxes, so to speak, that I'll be working with Executive Director Fox and other staff members on. So if there are recommendations, or additional findings you think of about the meeting, or have recommendations for the next agenda, again, please email that on an individual basis to the board president and the executive director. The last piece of information I wanted to share is I had sent an email message to executive director on November 20th with this information, and I just wanted to make sure that all my colleagues here had equal access to that information and at this time. And that is that I've decided not to seek renewal for another term with the Board of Pharmacy. So as of now, my term will be ending on June 30th of 24. So thank you. We are at 4:12. As I will use similar experiences in classrooms and long faces at the end of a long 3 days. I think I would be, my physical well-being would be at risk if I were to say, hey, do you want to go jump into compounding school again? So I will call for the end of the meeting at this time, unless and if you mention to that, you can say no when I read the motion. Before we adjourn, for board members who took written notes before or during the board meeting, please provide your written notes to staff member McLean. Please add your name and today's date and confidential, in quotes, if they were taken during executive session. If you would like to keep your written notes, please go to the board office. I emphasized before you depart today, depart the building so that staff can make copies. If you took electronic notes outside of OneDrive, email your notes to karen.s.mclean@bop.oregon.gov. I, board member Doyle, move to adjourn at 4:13 p.m.
Member Chin, second.
Member Beeman, yes.
Member DeBarmer, yes. Member Hall, yes.
Member Hemmings, yes.
Rejoice, yes.
Member Patel, yes. Member Peppermint, yes.
We are adjourned.